Welcome everyone to today's lecture of Immanuel Kant. Now, what is great about Kant is he has done two great contributions to the field of philosophy. The first one of those is obviously the moral laws, which he is known for, and the second one is the methodology he uses to prove or disprove topics, which is reductio ad absurdum. So let's start. Immanuel Kant was a late 18th century German philosopher who lived in the Enlightenment era and had massive contributions to the Western thought. And he lived in the Copernican revolution of philosophy. So now, before the Copernican revolution, where they discover that the Earth is not the center of the universe, there are people like Descartes, there are people like Locke, who don't believe that the mind does much, really. It just takes in information and then processes it, doing nothing else. Like, they just believe it's a passive receiver. But with the Copernican revolution, everything started to change. So people started to question, and Kant argued that the human mind is an active creator of knowledge, instead of just being a passive receiver. And as I said, there was Locke, there was Hume, there was Descartes, some of them being empiricists, some of them being rationalists, and they believed in a white or black, black and white reality, where you either gain your information or the truth through reason, or you gain the truth through experiences. And he tried to merge these two. So he said that an individual's mind actively organizes experiences to understand how the world functions. So this active organization step is through reason, and of course they get the meaning from the experiences. So the experience is the raw material, but it has to be processed in our minds to actually understand how the world functions. So he created three critiques. The first one was a critique of pure reason. What can I know? Asking the question of what is the boundary for metaphysical knowledge. It investigated knowledge derived from pure rational thought. And then his second book came, which asked the question, what ought I do? So, what do I need to do? What must I do? And it formulated the moral philosophy and the nature of duty and ethics. In this book, he introduces the categorical imperative. And this book is arguably the most important book of his, which is a critique of practical reason. We will go into topics that are present in this book, maybe in the next week, but we will be touching upon it this week as well. Critique of judgment is What May I Hope For, which connects knowledge and morality and explores aesthetic judgment and the nature of beauty and the sublime. It considers teleology and the ultimate purpose of existence. Now, I don't think you need to know too much, but just know that critique of practical reason is where he asks the what ought I do question, which forms the basis for the moral laws that he will construct later on, because it asks the question, what must I do? So the idea of enlightenment. So Kant defines the definition of enlightenment as humanity's emergence from a self-imposed nonage or minority. Now, I don't know if my pronunciation of nonage is correct, but it basically means is being the minority within your own mind. So Kant says that people that are living in that era do not really question authority. They don't really say anything being done to them. They are basically the co-pilots within their own mind. That's what it refers to as being a minority. You are a minority in your own realm of existence, which is inside your mind, And you're not questioning anything. You're taking things at base value, which is unacceptable for Kant. So he says that we are in a self-imposed nonage, which means you choose to be in this state of unquestioning and relying on the guidance of another person, only when it stems from an indecision or a lack of courage, rather than a lack of intelligence. Of course, there are people out there that are simply not smart enough to really question anything. He doesn't mean this. He means only when you are smart enough to actually question what's happening around you and what you are being told to do, but you're not doing these. This is when you are stuck in that state of nonage, when you are limited by yourself. So he puts out the motto of sapere aude, which we will check just how to pronounce sapere aude. We're going to be looking at it, which oh my god, it's just sapere aude. It's just sapere aude. I cannot cut that. I'm sorry. Well, the motto is sapere aude, which translates to dare to know or have the courage to use your own understanding. Because as we said, this state of nonage just stems from you being a coward or you being just lazy. So you don't want to question anything. So he says, be strong enough, dare to actually question things and dare to know, which is sapere aude, as we spoke. And Kant also noted that while people were not yet living in an enlightened age, they were living in an age of enlightenment. So, public versus private use of reason. What is private? What is public? We will see now. So, to achieve enlightenment, Kant argued that the public use of reason must always be free. Now, when we think of private versus public, what comes to our mind is that private is our own private lives where we are in our own houses, doing whatever we're doing, maybe sleeping, maybe playing games. But this is not what he's referring to. Private means living within society and assuming a sort of post or civil duty or civic duty or post where obedience is required. So think of a military duty. As a soldier, you are expected to obey orders. As a civil servant, you are expected to pay your taxes. As a clergy post, you are expected to follow doctrine. You mustn't argue and you mustn't do public criticisms about these because this is necessary for the current social order. Like, Kant is not trying to spark a revolution right then and there. He's not saying tear down the whole system that you're in. The people up there, they're trying to make you go bad. They're not looking out for you. They don't care about you. He doesn't say that. He says, okay, when assuming your private duty, you must use your reason to fulfill the needs of your duty, what is necessary for societal order. So don't create chaos. Don't just revolt against your people or your boss or anything. Just don't argue with them. Do your job. You don't need to do much there. But when it comes to the public use of reason, it must be always free. If you're speaking as a scholar, or maybe to the reading public, if you're trying to teach people something, if you're trying to speak out to the masses, then you must be absolutely free in your criticisms. You can write scholarly essays, you can address errors publicly, Now, let's go to the specific examples. A military officer, tax collector, pastor must obey orders and not argue while performing their official duties to maintain societal orders. But when they are using their reason in a public usage, which is the usage when you are speaking as a scholar, then those same individuals have their full freedom and obligation to publicly write and speak about errors or improvements in their respective fields as scholars. Why doesn't Kant just tell people to go and revolt if everything is so bad? And that's where the beauty of Kant comes in. He says that if we just do a revolt right now, if the people in charge are taken down, or if the whole system is crashed, then the new coming system will just have the same problems as the previous one. Because the people will not know of the advantages or the disadvantages of the current system, because they were just told to get rid of the current system without knowing what is wrong with the current system or what is working with the current system. So through this public use of reason that he talks about, his goal is to make people more knowledgeable and through time establish change in the current institutions that rule that society. So through time, when people read about these free uses of their reasoning, looking at the criticisms, people will say, okay, my workplace is bad. And as people continue to criticize this, then the people in charge will actually take some initiative and actually work towards fixing those issues that are being presented by the people that work under them. And this is the core goal of Kant. He says, don't ruin your current societal order, but embrace change within it and criticize it, which I respect. You know, not everyone is a revolter. So, Kant's ethics, which is the most central part of Kant. Kant's ethical framework focuses on a philosophic study of moral actions, strictly separating right from wrong with no gray areas. This with no gray areas is very important because he says, under no condition must you strive away from your morals. Absolutely nothing. Even if you have your friend maybe lying down in the bedroom and a stranger comes knocking at your door who's obviously there to kill your friend, you cannot say that he's not home. You cannot even tell a lie to protect your friend, because that would be breaking your morality. It's a strictly 1 or 0 situation. Something is either acceptable or something is not acceptable, with no gray zones. So Descartes based his truth on I think, but Kant rebuilt the foundation of truth on I ought, which means I must, making the moral law supreme. So the way you live your life, the way you achieve the truth is through morality. He then introduces 2 separate imperatives. The first one is a hypothetical imperative, if I remember correctly. Just a second. Yes, hypothetical imperative, which works on conditional commands. If you want, then you ought to do something. But categorical imperatives, instead of hypothetical imperatives, are things that you must do no matter the case, no matter the reason, no matter the results. Things that you are unconditionally obligated to follow to be considered moral. This is a universal moral law. So, this imperative dictates that you should only act in a way that could be universalized for everyone. What does this mean? This means that, for example, imagine a world, or imagine you go up to a stand and then you see a very nice milkshake. And then you think of stealing it because nobody's looking and you've left your wallet at home. So what wrong can come out of it? There, Kant would oblige you to think about what would happen if everyone on Earth just did the same thing as you do, which the thing in this case is stealing. Let's say, what would happen if everyone in the world stole? Now, very obviously, just thinking about it, you steal the milkshake, then the shopkeeper steals it from you back, and then you steal it back, and then you end up just in a loop. Secondly, no moral order could be conducted because everyone would be weary of each other and nobody would own anything, nobody would have anything belonging to them, nobody could be able to, do anything, and it will just end up with the people who are the most powerful and the people who can just steal the most being at the top, which is strongly aligned with our current world, which is proof that our current living conditions are quite immoral. Now, so with this example, we can see a demonstration of how we can apply this. Whenever you want to do something that could be morally questionable, you must think, could it work out socially if everyone on Earth did the same thing as I do? So, all moral judgments must be rationally supported and derived from rationality. So, just using your noggin is the main baseline for being moral. Being moral means performing an act intrinsically because you believe you should do it, making morality neutral and self-authoritative. So this means your morality should not be persuaded by anything other than yourself. It must become the end within itself, so nobody can convince you otherwise. For key ethical concepts, Kantian ethics revolve around the morally good, the will, autonomy, duty, and acting out of duty for duty's sake. And then he divides rational knowledge into three. The first one being natural philosophy, the second one being moral philosophy, and the third one being logic. Why does he do this? The reason for this is people in the ancient time, philosophers, often would get lost by trying to measure moral laws through the laws of physics. So what he says is, okay, we must split these fields so they are completely separate from each other. You don't really look at linguistics from a physical perspective, so you must not look at morals from a natural perspective. So the natural philosophy, the knowledge type is material. Material in this case refers to has a subject or an object attached to it. It's not merely just an analysis of things. And its main philosophy branch is natural philosophy, which looks at physics. It has empirical parts and pure parts. And then we come to logic, which knowledge type is formal. So you're only looking at the forms of logic, how you can think. You don't really have an object or a subject like physics of the world, gravity, or you don't have anything like ethics, morality. You just try to see how logic works. It's only concerned with universal laws of thought without distinction of objects. So if you do A, then what happens to B? Which is just interchangeable with anything that you do. And moral philosophy has empirical parts and pure parts as well. Its empirical parts being anthropology, which looks at humans, and pure parts, which is the metaphysics of morality, which we will get into in a second. And as you can see, it is a material knowledge type because it has an object, which is ethics or morals. So the antinomy of freedom. The word antinomy comes from anti and nomos, which is against rule. Kant explores the contradiction between the ideas that freedom exists and freedom does not exist using the method of reductio ad absurdum, proving a statement by demonstrating that its denial leads to absurdity. So, how can we check this? So, let's look at freedom. If freedom were to exist, let's say, freedom exists currently. So we will have to look at the opposite case where freedom does not exist. If there is no freedom, everything in nature is bound by an infinite chain of cause and effect. This infinite chain lacks a starting point. There must be a spontaneous starting point free from the causality chain, meaning free will exists to establish moral laws. So, let's understand it better. Let's say, since there is no freedom, anything that you do must be attached to something else, operating off of cause and effect relationships. No freedom means nothing that just pops out. But the absurd part is the fact that this infinite chain of cause and effect lacks a starting point. So, in conclusion, there must be a spontaneous starting point free from the causality chain, which is free will, that exists to establish moral laws. Of course, free will in this case is not the spontaneous starting point, but it just proves to us that starting points exist that are free from the causality chain. So spontaneous actions can be conducted. Therefore, freedom can be real as well. So, in the antithesis where freedom does not exist, the argument is if we assume freedom exists, there must be a spontaneous, lawless starting point to the causality chain. Because yes. Okay. To go in depth to the logic, it literally stems from the things that we talked about before. If freedom exists, then there must be a spontaneous, lawless starting point to the causality that starts everything. But it also comes with its own absurdness because reason dictates that we must explain relationships through the laws of nature. What are the laws of nature? It's cause and effect. But if cause and effect exists, then freedom cannot exist because it has no cause. So, what are we in? It's a gridlock. He explains these in his critique of practical reason. This is the last conclusion that he reaches in this topic. I just realized, you might have seen where I was baffled upon reading, but it doesn't make too much sense, that's why. It's all just a paradox, basically. But the way he addresses this, which we did not learn about, is in his critique of practical reason, he basically says that there are two realms. One that is dictated by the rules of physics, and the second realm, which is the ultimate truth, which is in your mind, which is controlled by your mind. So in your mind, there is no physics, there is no natural law, therefore there is no need for existence of cause and effect. But in the physical world, in the natural world, there needs to be a cause and effect. So your brain interactions and yada yada are the reason that you do anything that you do. But he doesn't explain the link between these worlds, so it's kind of up there. He just says, look, you're going to have to trust me on this one, or else people will start being immoral, just saying, oh, I'm just a piece of the domino. What can I do about it? And at last, he takes a look at practical principles. He defines practical principles as propositions containing a general determination of the free will. They are divided into two categories. One is subjective, which is maxims, which are conditions regarded by the subject as valid only for their own personal will, and objective, which are practical laws that are conditions recognized as valid for the will of absolutely every rational being. So, it differentiates between who is it in support of? Is it only benefiting you or the whole of humanity? And that's it.